This evening, Books and Books, in collaboration with Reading Queer and the Whimsical Project, is very pleased to present Beyond Margins Within Intersections, Caribbean LGBTQ Literature. This presentation will be hosted by Professor M.J. Fiev and Professor Omar Figueras. Professor Fiev is the author of the book A Sky the Color of Chaos and the editor of such books as All That Glitters and So Spoke the Earth. She's going to host the rest of the program for us, so please give a very warm welcome to M.J. Fiev.
Thank you. Thank you, Books and Books, for the warm welcome. Good evening, everyone. My name is MJ, and I run the Whimsical Project, a blog with sections focused on the contributions of local writers and those of writers from the Caribbean. Earlier this year, in collaboration with Books and Books, the Miami Book Fair year-round, Orange Island Foundation, and Reading Queer, the Whimsical Project was proud to announce the Caribbean Series. During the 2016 Caribbean Series, readers in South Florida enjoy up-close and personal discussions and book signings with authors with ties to the Caribbean and or whose work highlight island culture and interests. June is both National Caribbean American Heritage Month, enacted in 2011 by President Barack Obama, and National LGBT Pride Month. So tonight we are celebrating writers who belong to both groups. In the Caribbean, LGBTQ individuals live in fear of being ostracized at best and physically assaulted at worst. Our panel tonight will read stories and poems that address their common challenges and concerns as they embrace identities that intersect and that are also at the margins of society. They will discuss issues related to representation and visibility, both at home and in the diaspora, and consider whether literature can act as a dwelling place for those rejected by their families and communities. In a letter to Max Brod in 1955, Franz Kafka wrote, "A non-writing writer is a monster courting insanity." I'm sure the writers on the panel tonight will agree with the quote, as writers in the Caribbean are often forced into silence. Before I knew I was a writer, before I started writing down stories and poems, I was a lonely child playing with dangerous ideas. On the playground in grammar school, away from the monkey bars and the noise and the laughter, I pondered the issues of race, gender, class, and sexuality. Loneliness was a gaze into a mirror. As I carefully traced the outline of myself, yearning and searching to understand the dizzying mazes within, I thought about what I meant when I said me, and I became angry. Angry to have been born black, angry to have been born a girl. Don't get me wrong, I knew these things to be beautiful, but I also knew that too many people didn't see them as such, that too many people wanted to get rid of their own blackness, that too many people embraced stereotypical expectations of men and women. With the chaos in Port-au-Prince and in my own home, I craved an identity that was less complex, a voice that didn't require a fight to be heard. I wanted to be white, I wanted to be male. We all buy into the idea of belonging to some place or another. So we trick ourselves into thinking that we're nothing. We find ourselves on a tightrope hanging over the internal abyss. Later, I became a writer. Writing saved me from becoming the monster Kafka talked about. It allowed me to bring order to the chaos in my brain. After all, Albert Camus said, "The purpose of a writer is to keep civilization from destroying itself." Yes, I had found my purpose. Many writers experience this epiphany to the betterment of themselves and humankind. It takes getting real naked on the page to do that. A lot of self-implication. Empathy becomes a lifelong pursuit, your contract with the universe. You start by teaching yourself self-acceptance, and then your art gets the power to incite a reaction in other people. Our audience is so apathetic sometimes, and sometimes they're ignorant, and sometimes they're scared. Today, I feel a deep gratitude toward the universe. Being a woman in a patriarchal world, being black in a racist world, believing that love doesn't care about gender norms, all this forced me to fearlessly question hypocritical and harmful cultural values. I turned away from stereotypes, assumptions, stupidity. Writers from the Caribbean know about intolerance. It becomes their mission to go forth and spread empathy and tolerance into the world as they try to stay true to a sense of self and work on their own misconceptions and racisms. Writers wish to instill empathy and intellect in other people. They wish to meet others in the eye. They wish to shake them. But writers are continually undervalued, censored, and persecuted. Many communities will do whatever it takes to remain homogeneous and insular. As expressed by Rick Warren, our culture has accepted two huge lies. The first is that if you disagree with someone's lifestyle, you must fear or hate them. The second is that to love someone means you agree with everything they believe or do. Both are nonsense. You don't have to compromise convictions to be compassionate. Events like this one are important to continue to challenge sexist, racist, and homophobic stereotypes and ideology. I'm going to pass the mic to Omar. Thank you.
That was pretty profound. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously, you should make that available.
Omar is going to entertain you next. Omar Figueras is the Reading Queer Advisory Board member. He lives in Miami Beach and has a Master's of Fine Arts degree from Spalding University in Louisville, Kentucky, where he was a student fiction editor at the Louisville Review. His work has been published in Penumbra Literary Magazine, and he has read from the Miami-based storytelling series Lip Service, True Stories Out Loud. Currently, he is a fiction co-editor for Blood Lotus Journal and is completing a collection of short stories and a poetry chapbook reflecting on his experiences growing up in South Florida and Cumberland County, Pennsylvania. I give you more.
I'll put the mic here. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming this evening and for joining us here for this very important panel. In his introduction to the anthology Our Caribbean, a gathering of lesbian and gay writing from the Antilles, Thomas Glaine says that he conceived the collection from his wanting to know, quote, things about the people like me, whom I longed so much to know, and who, it seemed, were so often impossible to find. It was Glaine's loneliness and silence where he started his quest to find others who were like him, quote, out there. And it was the hardest thing in putting this panel together was finding writers, LGBTQ Caribbean writers that were out and working out in their communities. Terribly difficult in putting this together. But we're fortunate to have these wonderful fine artists here with us this evening. It's entirely possible that these same motivators, loneliness and silence, possibly have brought you out here this evening as well to hear these stories. And with the first, I would like to introduce Yesenia Al-Mager. Born from Cuban parents, Yesenia is a native of Miami and one of the city's fiercest emerging artists. She's an aspiring writer shaped by gender, religion, and her struggles as a transgender woman. Her work has been described as bold and honest. She began to nurture her writing ability at the RQ, the Reading Q Academy, most recently attending Jan Becker's Writing Boot Camp, where she wrote the piece, I Am Not My Father's Son. May I introduce Yesenia Al-Mager.
Well, good evening, everyone. Before I begin reading, I want to share a thing that happened to me yesterday. And it was, an argument I had with a person who's loving and dear to me, who told me that I should keep what my art and writing as a hobby, that I should focus on what's really important. And that's why I'm here, because it's what's really important. Because I can assure you that growing up, I didn't feel that I had a voice. I didn't feel that, I could express myself in any other form until I found the Reading Queer, which was not so long ago. And, living as a hermit crab as I've lived, I felt that I should just live day to day without having a voice, without stating how I feel, or without stating my woes and what, I kind of feel as how am I going to get ahead? What is my purpose here? So that's why I'm here, to turn poison into poetry. This piece I wrote, which was my first, is called I'm Not My Father's Son. I am not my father's son. He wanted macho. He got mujer, the complete opposite. To him, I was the opposition of life, death. He wanted softball. I gave him jump rope, jumping towards the sky in hopes, but no hope. He wanted tough. I gave him sissy. He wanted 2 balled up fists. I gave him 2 broken wrists. Him, ashamed as they commented, tu hijo es un maricón. He was torn. Which team should he pitch for? Them or me? The dreams he had for his son, broken. Dreams that will never be, because his son was infested with a disease called transsexuality. To him, I was cursed. For me, it was freedom. A freedom I yearned to experience, but at what cost? How will I pay? I paid. From the scars I have on my flesh to the fingerprints that bruised my skin. That was my receipt, how I paid. I yearned to be the woman I was not born as, yet felt it through every fiber of my existence. I am not the son you wanted. I am a girl, I yelled. He froze. No more words were uttered, just his tears spoke. They say time heals all wounds, so to speak. Nothing can be said, nor can anything be done to bring back this father's beloved son. His son is buried alongside his father's shame, only to be resurrected as his daughter, who shall carry on her father's name. Thank you. On a little note, being Cuban, well, American, because I was born here, raised by 2 amazing Cuban parents, my struggle was being the clone of my father. As the 3rd child of my parents, I'm sure he wanted me to be his little macho and his ideal son, so to speak. But when things didn't quite turn out that way, it took many years for us to heal the wounds. And years before his passing, we made amends. And that's what's gotten me through all of this. And it's kind of very symbolic that my father is a prominent fixture in my work and in my art. And, I'm not my father's son, but I'm his daughter. This next piece I wrote is in Spanish. For all you non-speaking Spanish, I completely apologize. But if you find your nearest translator, please, by all means, feel free. Ni puta ni santa. Me cubro mi cara con un velo negro, lleno de encajes de pena y con bordes de lamentos, escondiendo mis ojos que cargan mis culpas que brillan desde lejos. Arrodillada, arrastro mis verdades contra el piso, dejando huellas de sangre que llega a los pies de la cruz de Jesucristo. Quítalo a él, tu divino Hijo. Penetra mis manos con tus castigos clavos y cuélgame a boca abajo como tu ángel que ha salido diablo. Fui yo quien ha usado mi templo en que nació convento y brinqué en las llamas de mi querido infierno. Maté mi sed con aguas desconocidas, llenándome de comidas mientras me rellenaba mi cuerpo con sus sudores y veneno. El intercambio, mi alma por mi pan diario. Ya se aliviaron y yo en inmenso dolor me pongo mi velo negro y sigo mis pasos de luto. Padre nuestro que está en los cielos, santificado sea tu nombre. Nací abandonada y violada por el hombre. Y aquí estoy rodeando este mundo sin nombre. Puta para poder comer y santa para poder renacer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yesenia. Thank you. Our next reader is going to be J. Winston James. He's a Jamaican-born poet, author, essayist, and editor. He holds a BA. He holds a BA from Columbia University, an MFA in fiction from Brooklyn College, and he is the author of the Lambda Literary Award and Pharaoh Grumley Award finalist collection, Shaming the Devil, collected short stories. He is the author of The Damaged Good, Poems Around Love, and the Lambda Literary Award finalist collection, Lyric, Poems Along a Broken Road. His essays appear in the anthologies For Colored Boys Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Still Not Enough, and Love, Christopher Street, Reflections of Gay New York. James is co-editor of the historic anthologies Voices Rising, celebrating 20 years of Black lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender writing, and the Lambda Literary Award finalist publication, Spirited, Affirming the Soul and Black Gay Lesbian Identity. He's also the author of the introduction to American photographer Thomas Roman's 2015 monograph, In the Valley of Kashmir.
Whoa. Thank you very much, MJ. Is this on? Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm going to read poetry tonight. I guess I'll just... This poem is entitled Exile. In this land where my parents have taken me, I am close to nothing except the earth. tasting the wind to gather some scent of my history. The breeze that blows, the rain that falls here is bitter and cold, like them. Those others from whom the word coconut has become an insult. Aki, the sound one makes when one spits. I ache to hear stories from my mother of tamarind falling from the sky. I dripping from Rastamen's lips, fruit sold from Higlath eyes. Yet in all these years she has told me nothing. Jamaica died in me in her silence. The sun set on the island when she left. My mother refuses to let it re-arise. At other times, I've hoped to see roots grow from my father's mouth, our family branch from his eyes, to hear of Kamina rituals working and duppies unwilling to cross to the other side. Yet he never offered me even my grandmother's name, a photo of his wedding, or a hint of Westmoreland or my family's greater size. What have I done to deserve this? They offer me breadfruit when I cry. Exile mars their faces as they eat. They shovel forkfuls of rundown as I make to ask them why. I am lost in this land where my parents have brought me. This is in my father's house. His house is trembling. My father knows untold that men recline naked on the inside of my mind. Kitchen tiles are lifting in their anxiety. No more perfumed lies ready in my pockets. Truth is the white stain cringing on my thigh. This man is a knife. His ears are gone. The knot of our blood has come undone. The back door is pleading, do not wait, angel, run. If my father's hand should rise, I will not stand here like television, waiting for love to spill me into a puddle. I will not cherish the blow that breaks me. I will not see his face, but the Bible in his eye. If my father's hand should rise, I would sooner hate him, flee, and live, than remain here still out of family and die. This is The Twisted Mirror. And I'm reading this because I think that being forced, feeling as if you're forced to hide creates psychic injuries that lead to certain behaviors. So this is The Twisted Mirror. He is fleshy, every ounce of him involved in his demise. Stealth does not become him. He cannot sneak into another man's attraction here, nor turn a corner quickly in hopes of evading his size. He moves more slowly as the moths flicker past him. Rejection harms, weighs him further. Sweat drips from his beard, coats his inner thighs, but still he remains. Stays because to leave untouched is to fail, to lose more in more ways than he can describe. He kneels in the comfort of shadow, gives up the benefit of his eyes, waits, begging silently, forgets his own misshapen needs. He must touch flesh to survive. And they come, finding relief between the rows of his teeth, a salve for their abrasions, a urinal for this moment in their lives. They leave, his penis in his hands, kissed yet only by the night. He tugs, but loneliness is far stronger. Mice are watching him. Insects play in the light. He imagines himself rotting there on his knees and knows in the softness of his heart that no one could be beautiful like this in their minds or God's eyes. Orgasm escapes him. He climbs to his feet, sighs. because I'm a believer in nothing if not hope. This is Uprising. I want to start a campaign, one that gets homosexuals to recall what it means to be gay. A campaign that will scrape away at millennia's worth of stone to unearth the legions of sissified warriors who lived, died, and worked their magic in, on, and about this world. I want to ignite a protest, to gather all the mystics in one place that we might speak that one truth that will suck the moisture from the air and create oceans at our feet. That truth that will snuff out the light and remind the children that we have been here since creation. I want also to invoke the Bible, to say that in the beginning was the Word, and that Word shaped the universe into a thing of so many wonders that mortal man can only fail to see, unless he admits that he is as blind as the stars and much less significant than the trees that have survived far longer than he. I want to summon the truth of names and the defining energy that dwells within them, to let the mouths of our enemies show us that they have always known that we were defined by power. As the fairy's magic lives, the flame of the faggot burns, the strength of the dyke holds, and the gaiety of the queer endures. I want to ignite a blaze, a conflagration of lesbians who remember what it was like to watch their sisters burn in the night, struggling against the fetters that bound them to the witching posts and to the lies and to the angry penises jealous of feminine power, so softly displayed like iron at the hot core of the earth. I want us to shatter the windows of heaven with diamonds, to assemble before the throne of God dressed in the stars and holding the planets in our hands, asking the angels simply, are we not beautiful? That the rivers and the wind sing our names in the gloaming. If we are not, then God destroy the world, for you have put nothing marvelous in it. Thank you.
Our third reader this evening, J.B. Portela. Born in La Habana, Cuba in 1989, J.B. Portela is a poet, translator, and editor based out of Miami, Florida. He's finishing his dissertation on sexual politics of contemporary Cuban culture at Florida International University, but sometimes leaves the ivory tower to serve as editor of Highlight magazine, the assistant editor of Highlight Books, the programming director of Reading Queer, and the translator of the O Miami Poetry Festival. His poetry has appeared in journals like Conexos, Sensation Feelings, and Nagari. He is the translator of 2 books of poetry, David Landsberger's Suicide by Jaguar, Highlight Books 2014, and Cuban poet Lenya Rodriguez Iglesias' Chicle, Letras Cubanas, forthcoming later in 2016, which will be the first translation into English published by an official press since the advent of the revolution in 1959. He shares a tiny home with his lover, 4 disinterested cats, and some dusty piles of books. J.B. Portela.
Thank you all for coming tonight. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Thank you all for coming tonight. You guys for organizing this incredible and important reading. I want to begin by saying that everything I read tonight is dedicated to the present, future, and historic victims of homophobia and toxic masculinity around the world. I don't think I need to remind anybody. This first poem I'm reading is called I'm Not Naked on a Mountaintop, and it's part of a series of poems that I've been writing on the basis of first lines of poems that really speak to me. And this one comes from a poem by C.A. Conrad that begins with, I'm naked on a mountaintop being kissed by someone I love. I'm not naked on a mountaintop being kissed by someone I love. I'm neck deep in cat hair, post-its and binaural beats. 200 hertz are not enough to get my head on right. Or was it off I wanted? Either way, I'll try 240. Yell at the cat to stop that racket. I'm not playing, after all. I'm working. I'm fully clothed and professionally distracted. And who can play with their dick or a computer cord when we're treading all this water, making soup out of our lives, serving it out of our navels, getting dismissed, or just distracted by what? By death, desire, by all the blinking lights of human, especially myself, most blinking of all the lights. A small plastic LED faux candle, always on the verge of being snuffed out, yet somehow staying on. Or was it off I wanted? Either way, I'm working. I'm busy neglecting the wound garden, busy refusing to water the ferns, choking the crotons, humiliating everything resembling a rose. Do you know how much effort that takes? Besides, the closest thing to a mountain in this swamp is the municipal dump, and I'm just not playing anymore. The second poem I'll read is part of another series I'm working on, and it's very germane to what recently happened. I have control issues and a controlling, perfectionistic Cuban mother. So did everyone else. I have a big problem with the fact that I can't talk back to history, that it seems to happen despite myself. That I wake up one morning and history happened, and then I have to make sense of it. And I don't have a lot of recourse, legal or otherwise, but I have my poems, and it's one way for me to speak back. And so I've been using headlines of things that really horrify me as a way of being able to speak to what seems to me unspeakable. This one's called, and this is the headline, "A Dolphin Dies Being Passed Around for Selfies." A dolphin dies being passed around for selfies. Is someone still alive here? No. We're dead. Our blowhole stuffed with sand, our skin palm slapped, massaged, and passed around for a baby. This is here our face. This, the human heart, made fish for someone else to fry, made ready for the thud inside the concave grave of human going down the drain. It's true. From here, it can all look the same, but that's just an illusion, a trick the light plays on the drying eye of death. Delight. This dream is what it looks like. A broken leg, a seashell knife cutting the fat, our floating face, our poor receding wave, our little close-up made in China. And yes, we scream. Of course we scream because it's our moment. And whatever can be said is just a sad campaign, a virtue signal from beyond the planet posture. All of this, of course, could be our little secret, but we just love secreting. Love to tell the world to smile, knowing the human brain is but the human heart is just a maw. So maybe just warm up whatever sand you can around you. Maybe just shut up, and maybe just shut up, maybe just shut up and smile. Pixel, blink, and kitchen river. And this one begins with a quote from Mark Lechner. A river finally arrives when it goes dry. 4 rivers trickling into my kitchen. I'm awake, and the pears are rotting. The world is in its petri dish, begging for more. Naturally, I give it up. No latex gloves, no beakers, just humming or luminescence, just a body. Always a body. An act of generosity that might or might not matter to the octopus in the jar next to the flooded sink. But I'm no doctor. More a tentacle than healer. Your favorite suction cup. That thing with which some other thing reaches the bottom. A river. something with which to reach into this kitchen, mine, to make this body mine, and heal, come rushing. Is there a better nurse? Blame the pixels, our new prairies slicked in pear rot. Blame the world that watches from its petri dish, making peer-reviewed demands for sugar water when there's only rivers in my kitchen and they don't trickle anymore. They take to rushing. The last poem I'll read is a poem of redemption. It's a poem of vengeance, like any good thing. A life in heels. You arrive, lymph nodes clogged and fresh from the market deli. A boysenberry beauty in a bathrobe, singing self and body sleep. Singing you are verb made slow. A film spread thin over the droning lens of world, so slant and skew can slut their way around the real. Do what they came to do. Distort, destroy, cut every brick called home into a line and snort this body homeless. Undone, unhinged, and uninvited, you've nonetheless arrived. The party's not for you, but you know how to blow out candles. When someone asks to keep watch over the cake, swat summer flies away, instead you gorge on every piece of sugar meat ever denied you. Wake up from diabetic dreams a decade down the line, climb down your own braid to the suburbs. Is this Oz or Hialeah Hospital? Freedom or just a high fever? It is your quinceañera after all, and you're arriving. You're still deranged in business suits and manic, swirling for the pearl. An ultra-wristed infra-fairy fuck dressed up in pastel pasties for the prom. But look, no hands. Look, Mom, no self. Just every brick called home being carried out onto the dance floor of another life. A life in heels, a fever and a freedom. A boysenberry beauty in a bathrobe. A droning lens that watches something else. A hunger for another self becoming other. Thank you.
Well, this is where we'd like to open up questions to you, the audience. If you have any questions for our readers this evening with regards to the material that they've read, or any questions in general? Yes, absolutely.
Folks, if we have any questions or comments, please raise your hand so I can get to you with the microphone, because without the microphone, the live stream audience watching on their computers at home won't be able to hear the question. So are we going to have, were we going to do a panel discussion before the Q&A? Did you, MJ, Omar, did you have questions to start the discussion, or?
You want to go ahead? Okay. All right, great. Well, we wanted to ask you all, you can answer these, take your time, just in order or anything like that. When did you first know?
Wait, I'm sorry.
When did you first? Oh, no.
Leave
Still,
it there. Just
when
that's
did you
the
first
question.
know that you were a writer?
Well, as far as being a writer, I didn't even discover that till, again, I attended the Reading Career Academy Jen Becker's boot camp. And as a child, I used to like tear little pieces of paper off and write little things that embodied what I thought at that time, you know, and, you know, I kept a diary and, you know, little things like that, but I didn't quite know that I had a spark till I, you know, attended the Reading Career Academy. You know, it's as simple as that. So thank you. Reading Queer.
Funny enough, I don't remember beginning writing, but I do remember that my second grade report card to my parents said that my teacher wrote that your son writes beautiful poetry. And I don't remember what I wrote. I don't remember who my second grade teacher was. But I also do know that writing in many ways helped to save my life, because I did feel like I was an outsider, and I still feel like I'm an outsider. And there were many a poem that I wrote to comfort myself. And I remember in college that people thought that my poetry was very dark, and people thought that I was planning to commit suicide. Little did they know that any suicide I was committing was in the poetry. I had already done that.
I guess the question is complicated because I was born into a family of writers and professors, and so I grew up with books. And my mother, I was born in Cuba, and I lived there until I was 9 in 1999. And there were no, we didn't have a car. Our father, and my father, her husband, abandoned us in the way that men do. And so she had to fend for herself while she was over there. And her number one priority every week was writing over 25 miles to the Central Library in Cuba with me on the back of her bike. And she would let me loose in the library. And this is the main library in Havana. This is 7 floors. I mean, it's like a massive marble building. And so books were integral to my early childhood. And the story goes, I don't really remember this, but my mother says that I taught myself to read when I was 4. I would ask her like what the B with the A sounded like and the P with the A. And she wondered for a while why I kept asking her like what all these letters sounded like. And one day she walked in and I was reading from a book. It's a very famous book, La Edad de Oro by José Martí. And she turned to a random page and had me read randomly from a page just to make sure that I was actually reading. And I guess like that memory, which has been retold only by my mother and my father, has always stayed with me as a kind of a seed, kind of that originary moment, a way for us to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. How the hell do we get obsessed with something called writing? And then have it be this sickness that you have to nurture and like for the rest of your life. Like, we're sick people. Writers are sick, and that's great. I mean, like, being sick is kind of nice, but it's like you have to find ways to like make sense of it. But it makes no sense. I have no idea how I ended up being a writer. I guess it's the conclusion of what I'm saying.
Thank you. Omar and I also wanted to know what were your first artistic influences and which were your first literary ones?
I mean, I can go first if you guys are thinking about it. I mean, for me, the answer is really automatic. It's Lorca. Lorca was the first faggot I found in literature. I mean, I just like, when I found Lorca, the world changed. There's a moment before and there's a moment after. It's like finding Foucault. For me, it's just like, nope, there's not a life that you knew anymore. There's another life. And my mother gave me Lorca very innocently and probably despite herself in a lot of ways. And she had no idea that it was gonna, I mean, I just had no idea that people like me wrote, that they like could make books and that could be known and they could still be celebrated as one of the most important writers of the Spanish 20th century. And he was a raging faggot. So am I. And so, like, getting that validation, that kind of reflection really meant a lot to me. And he was my first, definitely my first. I must have been, let's see, 7.
Whoa.
7, yeah. Well, like I said, my family, books were big. So all of my gifts growing up were books. It's just like.
Did you realize then when you read that you could relate to him because you were yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't really have the word for what I was. I have them now, unfortunately. But there was a time when I didn't know what I was. I tried to
relate it anyway.
Well, I was made to relate. There was a way in which the desire I was feeling was translated to me as something I needed to identify around and something to identify around. And like now, thank goodness it happened in that way, and whatever, all of us get thrown into that game. But I don't know. There was a time when I just didn't know. But it was the first time that somebody else that might have been called a faggot too, like I was getting called at 8, was writing open and openly about it. And it wasn't like my mother tried to keep it from me. She explained it to me in the best way she knew how. So that for me has always made Lorca my kind of literary grandmother. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, MJ mentioned how writing saved you from becoming that monster. I think I still became that monster, but it saved me. It saved me from another kind of monstrosity. I'm not as afraid of Kafka's monstrosity as I am of other kinds that I could have become. I did not become Kafka's monster.
I found myself unprepared for that question. Luckily, the brain still works. So early on, definitely Emily Dickinson, safe in our alabaster chambers. Robert Frost, Langston Hughes were big influences on me. And I remember actually, in many ways, copying Langston Hughes' poetry. I would follow his meter and maybe even start with the same line that he'd begun with. So I mean, I guess the result was my poem, but it was clearly based on Langston's poetry. And then as far as fiction is concerned, the novel Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is written in dialect, inspired me to no end and inspired my first short story. And the poet, author Sapphire, I'm not sure if you guys know Sapphire, but she inspired me back when she was doing poetry in New York as a lesbian. I'm not sure if she's a lesbian anymore, but I was moved by this woman who got up there and said pussy and fuck. And I, you know, you kind of don't realize that literature doesn't have to be nice. And that was very important for me.
Well, me, first of all, I have always been a visual, and, you know, I used to reread my diary over and over and over again, and I would think to myself, oh my God, you know, no one's life could be this tragic. So, and mind you, I was like 13, 14 years old. You know, my parents never nurtured a writing or a artistic, you know, value in me until my art teacher, Mrs. Marcus, God rest her soul wherever she's at, saw something special in me. So I began painting and whatever, but you know, as far as literature is concerned, well, visual aspect, you know, I've always, you know, saw things, you know, and I rented my first Almodovar movie when I was 13 years old, and it was Matador, you know, and I was immediately drawn to the, you know, it. I've always said vulgar is in the eyes who view it. And I saw such beauty and such, you know, poetic in it. So I rented another movie, which was, you know, was Tacones Lejano with Miguel Bosé. And, you know, that was my poet. You know, that was my literature. And honestly, you know, my peers have history of reading books and whatever and whatnot, and it's, you know, it's admirable. But I've always been a visual. And then into my 30s, I bought my first book by Anne Sexton, and it was The Awful Rolling of God. And I just was immediately drawn to the tragicness of her life, because I felt my life was very tragic. You know, being transgendered, you know, not knowing how to identify it when I was 5, 6, until I was 12 years old. How do you tell Cuban parents that, oh, I want to be a girl? You know, so I basically found, you know, the visual as, you know, salvation. And, you know, not until recently, you know, I basically began writing again and drawing again, and it became my salvation again to, you know, to voice my experiences, voice what I feel. And, you know, that's basically how, you know, I got into writing, and how, you know, it sparked, you know, again, the spark is a, you know, a reoccurring theme, because, you know, like, everything in my life sparks me, you know, whether it's a negative or a positive, especially the negative. You know, it sparks me, and I want to feel the flame. So
But amazing how
Thank you.
and influences need not be literary. It is the visual, cinematic. I remember one of the first images that I saw that just struck me was Gainsborough's Blue Boy.
Yeah.
And I was just fascinated with the blue satin and the gaze of him looking out into the audience as well. So it's just one is the threshold to the other.
Definitely.
So if you all would be able to speak of a time where you felt powerless to communicate to a loved one how you felt about your sexuality. Have you been able to confront that loved one since and tell them how you felt about yourself and your fears of honestly exposing yourself?
Can you repeat that again? I need to just,
If you-
yes, digest it.
Well, if you could speak of a
chew it,
time. Yeah.
let it marinate, and my taste buds, absorb it, because
If you could speak of a time where you felt powerless to communicate to a loved one how you felt about your sexuality, and have you been able to confront that loved one since and tell them how you felt about yourself and about the fears that you had about honestly expressing yourself at that time?
My mother. My mother's, please forgive me for what I'm going to say. My sister's in the audience, and so is my other sister. I've always called my mother Hitler because she has a very, I know she feels in her own way. She's a Gemini, mind you. If any Geminis I'm here, I'm sorry, but I'm just being honest. This is coming from a Libra. So, my mother, I honestly, let me start at the beginning. On Halloween, mind you, ironically enough, I told my mother, oh, Mom, I want to be a girl. Oh, okay. So, but I'm straight. I like girls, mind you. I like girls. See, you'll say. That was your answer to anything. See, you'll say. So, I was like 14, I believe. And at 15, I told her, Mom, I think, like, I couldn't bear to say I want to be a girl. I felt like a girl. Tu hijo es mujer. Because she'll be like, "Ah, tú estás loco, ¿qué te pasa?" Whatever. My mother is very, like, she'll jump and be like, no, ¿qué te pasa? Whatever. So even now at 40, I have never been able to be honest with my mother and tell her, how I feel about being transgender. Because, I haven't felt, I'm being 100% sincere. I haven't felt that, the gates have been open. Not that she's, not welcoming of it, because she comes from a different time, and I hate when people say that, but I'm saying it now. I don't mean to contradict, myself, but, I just feel like, it's like, why now? Like, she accepts it. She turns the cheek at, at it, but it's there, but she doesn't want to embrace it. So that's been a conflict, with her, because with my dad, God rest his soul, he acknowledged it in his way and blah, 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 and whatever. And yeah, you're my loquita, as he called me before he passed. So, but he accepted it in some way. I always felt that my mother hasn't told me I accept you. She loves me because I'm her child, don't get me wrong. But have I felt that she wholeheartedly accepts me as her daughter? Absolutely not. And I'm being 100% honest. And it's kind of a very therapeutic session that I'm saying this now, because I've always swallowed that part of, dealing with my mother. So, have I confronted her and saying, oh, how do you feel about you having a transgender daughter? No, because I don't feel that she would be honest in answering it. That's just my honest opinion. on the whole situation. Thank you.
This may be a somewhat oblique answer to the question, and it's sort of two parts. I was 19 when I went to Mexico for a summer abroad program, and I met my first boyfriend ever in Mexico, Francisco Ruiz Peña, who I can't find.
I'm being sarcastic.
Who I can't seem to find on Facebook because there are a lot of Francisco Ruiz Peñas in Mexico. But that was a liberating experience for me. It's my first time sleeping with a man overnight. So when I came back to the United States, I went back to my university and I came out to my friends. And someone who was close to me, this guy named Luis Claudio, who's an Asian guy, he heard me say that I was gay. Then he accused me of having lied to him, as if I had said I was straight, which I never said. And then every time we sort of hung out together, no matter what woman it was, "Ooh, isn't she hot? Don't you want some of that? Isn't she beautiful?" Ultimately, our friendship ended. And I say that not to be humorous, but to say that I find human beings to be strange creatures. Like, I don't understand, even to this day, how it is that I changed suddenly by telling him an aspect of myself. I don't think that my homosexuality is who I am, but it is an aspect of who I am. So for the entirety of me to be colored by my sexuality was something that I couldn't really grasp. And the other part of this is that I believe that coming out is a process, and I think that different people do it in different ways. I don't believe in outing people. I think that's a horrible thing to do to people. When I was probably 20s, my father was asking everybody about my sexuality. He asked my sister. He called a friend of mine in New York who was a lesbian and asked her if she was my girlfriend. So she told me about that conversation. My sister told me about the conversation. So I went to my father and I said, "I hear that you've been asking around about my sexuality." And he said, "Yes, I just want to know if you're a faggot," which, and I said, and again, largely because I don't feel like I'm going to come out until I'm ready to. I said, I may be a faggot, and it's really none of your business if I'm a faggot. So he says, you might be. And I said, yep, I might be. I might be. But if you want to know something about me, ask me. Don't go asking my friends. And this conversation didn't go well. Next thing you know, he's reaching into the sink, I suppose, for a knife. I go into my sister's room and lock the door. He goes down into the basement to his storeroom to get a hammer to break down the door. I leave. This is what that poem in my father's house is about. Luckily, I had options. So I left that house and I moved somewhere else the next day. And I came home. I was packing my stuff. He came home and said, this is his Jamaican apology. His Jamaican apology was, well, at least no one got hurt. And I was thinking, well, I can't live in a house with someone who a disagreement could potentially lead to my death. So I need to leave. However many, 20 years later, my father and I are cool. I never came out, but what I have done is to bring every boyfriend that I've had home for the holidays. In some cases with baby in tow. And my parents have just gotten used to the idea. But I also recognize that they don't really want to talk about it. And I think that that's fine. As long as I can live my life, they can live in whatever phase or stage of denial they wish, and it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess as I've been thinking about how to answer, obviously for me, very early on, it was definitely my mother who I probably had the most trouble communicating it to and eventually did. I had a very, I guess in retrospect, funny coming out experience. I went to a high school in Hialeah where when I came out, I was the one other person in a school of 3,000 people that was out of the closet. It instantly made me a target for all kinds of micro and macro aggressions. I was the target of physical emotional, and psychological violence every day. Every day going to school was thinking I could get beat up today, I could possibly die today sometimes. And when I came out to everyone but my mother. I had the misfortune of having my mother teach at the same high school I went to. And so it made being out at school even more complicated. Usually, when you identify in some way around your sexuality in ways that are not heterosexuality, spaces outside of the family can be havens where you can be yourself, but I had no space outside of my family. I am very skilled at keeping things from people, and I managed to get to all the way to my senior year of high school without my mother finding out. Now, that year of school, I had become political around my sexuality. I had become politicized and conscious about the importance of rising up in very particular ways, and I had been bullied by a group of people for a long time, and I decided to strike back through MySpace. At that time, MySpace was a thing, and there were these things called bulletins, they're like announcements that you could post that everyone who was your friend could see, right? And so the way I was getting bullied all the time is somebody was telling me that they kept writing on my MySpace, oh, you're a faggot and you love dick. And one day I got tired and I was like, yes, I do. And so I don't understand what the insult is. Like, I like it in my mouth, in my ears, under me, on top of me. Like that. And so I listed all the ways that I like dick and the ways. That was the day before my last day at school, which is also the day before my 18th birthday, May 21st, 2007. And I was giving a presentation at the school auditorium. And in that message, I had referenced the girl who had been particularly bullying me. Her boyfriend came up while I was on stage in front of the entire school, grabbed me by the collar and punched me, broke my glasses off. And so I came out to my mom in the principal's office with a bag of ice on my face. What I forgot to mention is that while he was punching me, his girlfriend, the girl I mentioned in the post, went to my mother's classroom and got the printout of that MySpace bulletin that said all of the places in which I loved dick, and threw it at my mom's face and said, your son's a faggot. My mother was literally the last person in that school to find out that I was indeed a faggot. And the first question she asked me was, why did you leave me for last? And she understood that to mean that she was least important. And what I had to struggle to explain to her in that moment is that I left her for last because she was the most important. So when we moved out of Cuba and we moved to Spain, my family was always the one place where I could belong. And and not belong at the same time. That's kind of like the queer cross to bear in a lot of ways. I always thought that losing my family's support would be the end of me. Like, I could lose anyone, I could lose friends, I could lose everything, but as long as my mother loved me, then I was fine. And so I didn't tell her because I thought that it would mean that she would stop loving me. And not because I made that up, but because I had several friends whose mothers maybe didn't stop loving them, but certainly stopped showing it. And started showing them how much they hated who they were. And that's what I was really afraid of. My mistake was in thinking that I had that mother. Not that that mother exists. Anyone can become that mother. But I was blessed enough to not have that. And the first thing she said to me is, nothing about you has ever changed or will ever change, and I will always love you. It sounds ridiculous and it sounds sentimental, but it was the beginning of me coming home. I didn't realize that I could stand there. I thought that I could stand there like a little bit, like in my mother's love. I've never known anything like my mother's love. It's the closest thing to like an all-encompassing thing that I know of. It's also super human in a lot of ways. But she's also shown me that a lot of the things that we fear the most are the things that are just the things that we need to do. When I did it, again, a before and an after.
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, I was most afraid of having her disown and erase me. And instead what I found it's not that I had the courage, someone did it for me, thank God. I found out that everything I thought would happen didn't, and everything I thought could never happen did. And I'm not saying that that's always going to happen, but you're never going to know unless you do it. And I'm grateful that I had someone in my life to do it for me. I guess it's like a way to be grateful for bullying in retrospect. But the second point, and it's just I guess the most important one for me, is that there is never an outside of the closet. There's always another closet. Even after having come out to my mother, I had to keep from her that I had a black boyfriend. When she told me never marry a black woman, I was ready to marry. God bless me, I will never marry, but it's a black man. And so there was that closet. Even though I was already out of this closet, there was another closet, and then there's a closet of my gender identity. And also the other side is that the closet isn't always already a problem. There's things I don't have to disclose or identify around. There's things that are politically important I don't under certain contexts. And I've always told my friends, I'm like, did you ever have to sit your parents down and ask them and tell them who you wanted to fuck? Because I did. And I didn't want to, but I had to because they needed an explanation. I didn't. And so, like, there's just some things that I just don't. I'm okay with my grandmother never knowing I'm polyamorous. I don't need her to know that. She can love me entirely without knowing that part of myself. So there's two sides, I guess. I think it's important to be visible, and it's important to be invisible too. Invisibility is important too. And that's not to legitimize the invisibility of, for example, Caribbean queerness, for example. But that's to say that, like, it's my prerogative above all.
Very well stated.
Which lead me to a question about erasure. With the tragedy in Orlando, I felt by reading on social media that there was this frustration within the LGBT community that they were not included in the conversation, and that a lot of politicians were just erasing them from their own tragedy. And I wanted to know your thoughts about that, and how do you deal every day with people who just pretend that you're not part of that community? You talked a little about strong reactions that you get from people who are obviously homophobic. But what about the other people who just pretend, well, if I don't talk about it, it's not there? How do you deal with those situations?
Well, I mean, I have to say that I have not experienced the the post review of Orlando in that way. Perhaps because I know so many gay people, so it's been gay folks who have been sort of passing the news to me. And I have to say, I hear your question with a tiny degree of frustration as well, because I don't want us to ever sort of think that the Orlando tragedy was a gay tragedy, because it's not. I mean, it is, but it isn't at the same time. It's a human tragedy. And I think for us, for anyone who is attempting to squeeze it or to put it just in a gay box, you know, and this may be an unpopular thing to say, but I think there's something small about that. And I'm not going to participate.
All I want to say is that, you know, we were having that conversation, like, not even an hour ago, me and my sister and my other sister, about, you know, and I'm not going to apologize for this, but it's not about black lives or white lives or gay lives. It's all lives matter. Okay? And that's all I'm going to say. All lives matter, and that's it. That's it.
I think I'm always split in these conversations because I've always felt instinctively pulled towards the recognition of everyone's humanity. In a world that does not recognize humanity equally, however, it is not possible for us to grieve equally. When I spoke to my sister, my older sister, God bless her Republican soul, the first thing she said to me is, well, why is it only gay people that get to raise the gay flag? And I said, well, you know, I find it very ironic that usually the people telling me to put down the flag and put up the human flag are the very people who denied me my humanity in the first place. The very same people who told me and taught me that pride was necessary for survival. And so, for me, personally, the conversation is beyond whether or not the desire to grieve queerly is segregating. But can we grieve another way? We can simultaneously grieve in a way that segregates us and in a way that's universal. But you will never not make this a gay, whatever that means, a gay tragedy or a Latino tragedy. Yes, we are all human, but we don't all live under the same circumstances. We're not all subjected to the same levels of violence. The people who died at Pulse were not surprised.
What do you mean?
This is an increment of a violence they lived every day in many ways. And so it is their tragedy first, and then all of ours. It's not either or, it's both and. It is both human and Latino. It is both human and queer. And anyone fighting to erase either one of those doesn't get it in my book.
Yes.
I agree, and